Hello, hello. Welcome to One Wild World, a podcast by The Echo. I'm your host, Matthew Juneau.
And I'm the editor, Mike Davis.
I have a great story that ties in perfectly with today's guest and the work they do with animals.
Okay, yeah, let's hear it.
In college, I worked as a mentor for a group of incoming first-year students, and part of that role was being someone they could ask questions to. Anything from where buildings on campus were to time management skills. They were able to reach out to me pretty much anytime they needed. So one night, I get a phone call from a student, and they ask me if they're allowed to have a bat in the residence hall. I knew that weapons were not allowed, but I told them that bats most likely would be okay because it's also used for sports. But they quickly corrected me and said they meant the animal a bat, not a baseball bat.
I see. Very different things, those two types of bats.
Yes. And I should have figured it out because they knew I studied wildlife. I just didn't consider they would want a live bat that they found on the ground in the residence halls. So the obvious answer in this case was no. If you're barely allowed to have a fish as a college pet, there is no way a wild bat would be allowed. So I came and picked up the bat that they'd moved into a shoebox, but now the question was, what do I do with a bat?
Ooh, the plot thickens.
Indeed, it does. Luckily for me, I was able to get in contact with a local wildlife rehabilitation agency, and they helped me take care of the bat until I was able to get it picked up by a professional rehabilitator, much like the guest on today's episode.
That was definitely the best course of action, since the average person doesn't have the tools or the knowledge to properly care for a wild animal, especially if the animal is injured or in distress. Even a human-wildlife interactions student doesn't have that knowledge, really. Learning how to respond when you see hurt or injured wildlife is a super important lesson that I'm really looking forward to hearing today's guest go into more deeply.
Especially if it can help to keep bats out of the residence halls. That is always a win. Speaking of winning, you know I came prepared to stump you all with another round of What's That Animal? In wildlife rehab, you have to be able to take care of lots of different types of animals. So today, the sound we're featuring is an animal that's being taken care of by feeding it a tasty treat. Here's the sound. I'm also handing out bonus points if people can figure out not only the animal, but what the snack is. One more time, here's the sound. Stick around and we'll revisit this sound and reveal the answer at the end of the episode. Now, taking care of animals requires so much more work than merely considering what the animal eats. To expand on the nuances of wildlife rehabilitation, we hosted a conversation with Tallon Nightwalker, director of the Northern Colorado Wildlife Center. Let's head over to my conversation with him now. Today, we are joined by Tallon Nightwalker. Welcome, and thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me, Matthew. I'm excited to talk.
Yeah, how's your day been going?
It's been good. You know, we're in the height of busy season, and so lots of rescue calls and lots of fundraisers and education programs and habitat improvement. So it's definitely the best kind of busy, but busy nonetheless.
Can you tell us about Northern Colorado Wildlife Center and your goals with it?
Yeah, so Northern Colorado Wildlife Center is a nonprofit that I helped found about 6 years ago now. And we have grown to the point where we offer 4 different services to the Northern Colorado region. And that is wildlife rescue. So folks will call us when they find sick, injured wild animals, and we can walk them through how to help. Or we, a lot of the times, have to respond ourselves with our volunteers or staff, and we'll help that animal, provide any medical care, and then either transport to our care facility or someone that's maybe a little bit more specialized, better equipped to handle that kind of animal. We only do have care facility for reptiles and amphibians right now. So that's our second service that we offer, is the rehabilitation of those. And so this time of year, we're seeing a lot of animals that get hit by lawn equipment or turtles getting hit by cars. We just had a snake the other day that swallowed some golf balls that needed some help. And so we'll take in those guys, provide them the care and husbandry that they need, any medical care, surgical options, anything like that. And then we'll release them back into the wild. We also provide a lot of environmental education programs, visiting schools, community events, churches, anyone that really wants to learn about wildlife. And we do some habitat improvement projects too. So a lot of litter pickup and cleanup around the different natural areas and parks, but also some tree plantings and native grass plantings and things along those lines, whatever helps build wildlife habitat for the animals that we're releasing.
Wonderful. Yeah, it's good to have all the different types of work. So you're kind of working and educating, addressing some of the needs there, and then on habitat improvement to help keep these places nice for animals that use them.
Yeah, and hopefully soon enough, we will be able to expand and build more of a wildlife hospital that's more all-encompassing, because myself and a few other folks have our state licensing in the birds and mammals already and experience working with them. We have about 80 years of rehab experience on our team. And so we're looking to hopefully build up to that level of wildlife. But like you said, just all these little baby steps and just doing what we can with the resources we have right now.
Right now, you're working just with reptiles and amphibians, but throughout the year, you expand beyond that, right?
We do, yeah. So because we do have so much experience and some pretty cool equipment available to us, we do go out and provide the field rescue services, and we can splint the broken wings on birds if they hit a power line or a window. We can provide subcutaneous fluids. Like you said, with the summertime and the heat being out of control this year, most animals that we pick up are pretty dehydrated and need some fluids. And we're the only ones that do that in the whole state of Colorado. We're the only team that will actually respond to wildlife emergencies and provide that emergency medical care there, kind of how you would expect from an EMT going to a human medical emergency. And so we've seen a lot of animals get saved from it. We've served probably about 1,600 to 1,900 animals so far this year, and we still got plenty of year left.
All right. Getting back to the seasonality, I can imagine around springtime with lots of baby animals and accidents that might happen with parents. Are there other seasonalities with your work?
It is very seasonal. You're not wrong. And you hit the nail on the head as far as spring being the busiest, because, not only do you have all the babies getting born out there, but you have migration season. So we're seeing an influx of animals coming back into our state. And then also that is when folks are starting to get back out recreating outdoors and have more opportunities to find animals that need help, which is great, but definitely builds into that seasonality. Other than that, the busy season continues through the summertime because animals will have babies throughout the summer. And then in fall, we usually see a little bit of a spike too, because while birds have that one kind of baby season, mammals have two. So they'll have babies right at the beginning of spring for the few months there, and then right in the beginning of fall too. So going into August and September before the leaves fall. And so we'll see a little bit of a peak there. In the wintertime, it's pretty quiet across any rehab facility. We will see a decent amount of animals, but it's all adults, and it's usually trauma cases from getting hit by cars, or with hunting seasons, we'll see gunshot wounds and arrow wounds and things associated with that. But typically the winter is really good for deep cleaning everything and brainstorming how we can improve for the next season. So it's one of those things, about 90% of our animals that we see every year are injured either accidentally or maliciously from human activity. And so as long as there's humans out working in the outdoors or interacting with the outdoors, there'll always be needs for rehabbers and rescue crews.
That was a perfect transition into the next question, which is, when animals are coming to the center, is there commonality between a lot of those? And my guess was that it was probably going to be a lot of human interactions. And then how do you address the specific needs for different types of animals? Like, how does caring for a bird look different for caring to a reptile or an amphibian? So how does that play out?
So that's really where the diverse experience on our team comes in handy. And that's why we always want to have folks that report injured animals to us really not provide them any medical care or food or water, because every species is different. So like a blue jay is going to eat something vastly different than, let's say, an aerial insectivore like a kingbird. And a lot of folks, they run to Google, but Google is very rarely accurate with what an animal needs. So we just train everyone and we cross train our volunteers to be able to adequately take care of the different kinds of animals. It's different across not only the diets, but the kind of medications we can use, dosages, habitats that we put into their recovery enclosures. For example, a salamander or a toad is going to really need the cocoa fiber real moist so it can dig in. That's what their natural history dictates. They like to dig and hide. And that's going to be different than if I pick up a yellow-bellied marmot from Estes Park that needs some help and I can't just stick him in an aquarium or anything like that. And so it really is dictated by the experience that we have in collaborating as a team and saying, okay, what can we do for this animal individually? Our team has always, since our foundation, has taken a very individual approach to this job and looking at each patient's needs. If it's an invasive species, for example, like red ear sliders, they're very bad for ecosystems. They outcompete native animals. But if they become injured, let's say they get hit by a car because someone decided to illegally release it, that's not that turtle's fault. And so we'll take that turtle and give it the same care and everything, but instead we'll adopt that animal out to somebody. That way we can have the best of both worlds. So that's kind of what that comes down to is, just relying on the experience of the different people and communicating and working with each animal to give them what they need as a species and as an individual.
I know that there's a couple different options for when animals come to the Northern Colorado Wildlife Center, what can happen. So what portion of them gets released back into the wild? I know there's also trying to get people to adopt the animals, like you were saying. There's also sponsoring wildlife patients. So when animals come into the center, how do you choose where they're going to go?
Every animal that comes in, whether it's a snake or a lizard or a turtle or a toad or salamander that someone finds, and we're admitting it into NOCO Wildlife Center's hospital, we'll take that animal and we'll provide it an examination head to toe. And the first step is to decide if it's something we can help or not. Unfortunately, when you're working with medical industries, some animals are just going to be beyond help. And we have only the last resort treatment option of euthanizing them. I'm very proud of our success rate, which is about 95%. So that means 95% of the animals that we interact with, we're able to help and able to release back into the wild. And so we only have about 5% euthanasia rate annually, which only equates to maybe less than 10 animals. But that's a last resort treatment option, right? We're still helping them if we can't provide them anything else. But if that animal is something that can be helped, we will take it in. We'll give it the enclosure it needs. A lot of times they need the restricted movement. So they might go into a small enclosure with maybe just some basic paper towels and some hides and stuff so we can keep it relatively sterile. And then we'll decide, okay, does that animal need surgery? Does it need just some rest? Does it need acupuncture? Does it need massage therapy? Really, whatever it needs, we can give it. We really try to mimic the human medicine side on that front. And so then we'll take that animal in and we'll keep them as long as they need and then let them heal and release them back into the wild. So legally, in theory, wildlife rehabilitators in Colorado only have 180 days before they have to release it or make some kind of decision. But luckily, we have really great relationships with our Colorado Parks and Wildlife officer that governs us. And so usually we can get permission past that. Last year, we had a snapping turtle actually that came in and got hit by a car in Fort Collins. And we had it for 291 days before it was able to be released and back into the wild. And part of that was because working with reptiles and amphibians, you can't release them in the wintertime because they won't have time to find a hibernation den or anything like that or brewmate. So a large portion of that was overwintering that animal, but it's what she needed. And I'm more than happy to give that animal whatever resource I can, especially if it's just somewhere to hang out and stay warm and some free food and staff time. That's pretty easy. And so once an animal is done with rehab with us, we'll release it back into the wild, usually into a natural area or some kind of green belt. We have to make sure we're doing what's best for that animal. And so we have to release them within 10 miles of where they're found. That's the only tricky part is if we pick up an animal from Denver, finding a suitable habitat within 10 miles of some of those places can be difficult. And again, we can ask for permission against that too, and that's fine. They usually grant us it because everyone in the state that works with animals, we all are on the same team. There's really no true competition between us, and we just want to save animals and be part of the solution rather than the problems. And so usually we can get permission to release those animals into a pretty nice habitat for them.
Yeah, definitely. And especially I can imagine in Denver, if you're trying to release an animal, there's a difference between finding a landowner who's like, yeah, you can like let them go in my backyard versus finding a habitat that's good for that animal. I know that on your social media, which has been really engaging to follow and see some of these success stories, there was a snake that came in because it had a couple of golf balls, right? Are there any animals that you've seen since NOCO Wildlife Center has started that are really unique cases like the golf balls?
It's funny. I've been doing this for about 22 years now. Overall, I've probably rehabbed about somewhere in the realm of 68,000 animals that I've interacted with. It's funny how few times the same situation has come up twice. But for NOCO, we've had some really cool cases. We've built some really great relationships with some of the municipalities around here, as far as the City of Fort Collins Police Department, the sheriff's offices, and things like that, the different fire departments. And so the first case that kind of comes to mind that was really unique was back in 2020 when the Cameron Peak wildfire was going on in Larimer County. And it was the state's largest wildfire. And we actually were able to rescue a rattlesnake from that fire because some firefighters were digging line and they were using sharp tools to do that job. And they accidentally nicked this snake right on its side. So we were able to take it in. They were safe about it. They knew what to do. We were able to take that snake in. And yeah, sure enough, I had probably about a 4-inch laceration down its side. But we were able to do, with the help of our amazing veterinarian team at CSU, we were able to perform 2 different surgeries on it. We had to remove 4 ribs that were just completely shattered. And then we sutured up the muscles and the tissues there. And after a few months of rehab and antibiotics and pain medications and everything else like that, we were able to release it back up into the mountains, far away from any homes or trails or anything like that. And that was the only rattlesnake we've actually taken in for rehabilitation care. We've done other rescues when they get stuck in window wells or garages and stuff like that. But that was our only rattlesnake that we took in so far. And it was really unique because with reptiles, you have to give them their injections of medications in the upper third of their body or the upper half. So with turtles and lizards and stuff, that's easy because you can just do it in the front legs. But when you're working with a venomous species, things get a little bit shooken up. And so we have specialized equipment for all the animals we work with, but we had snake tubes that we were able to just kind of slowly inch higher and higher. And then we really worked that line. We're like, all right, that's the upper third, and then we'll go in there. And luckily, it was successful. Everyone did what they were supposed to and was very professional and safe about it. We didn't have to use any insurance policies, which I am always happy about. It ultimately led to the best result for that animal. It's a species that not everyone enjoys, that can get a bad rap out there, but that's a lot of the different animals that we work with. And so I was really happy about it. The pelicans, too, that's another case everyone loves. Like I said, we're the only team that does field rescue for all the different species of wildlife. And so we do water rescues as well. We have watercraft that we can take out. And we pick up a lot of the pelicans and herons that get stuck and tangled in fishing line litter out there in natural areas. And so those are always fun, too, because we can just kayak or paddleboard out to these birds. They can use some strategy to get them in custody. And then if they're not injured, we can just cut the fishing line off and then release them right there. And it's a very instant satisfaction. But, if they need to be brought into rehabilitation care, because a lot of them, the fishing line will cut into them or things like that. If there's hooks and stuff in them, then of course they need antibiotics and pain meds. And so we'll transfer them down, usually to Broomfield is where we transfer the pelicans to the birds of prey facility down there. Just because, like I said, until we expand our hospital capabilities, we just don't have the space for big pelican cages and fox runs and things like that. So those are always really fun cases to work with.
With the snake, how did you get the golf balls out?
Yeah, so that bull snake, it was funny because this person had intentionally placed those golf balls in her chicken coop to either promote the chickens to lay more eggs or decrease the amount that they're laying, trying to fool them into thinking they already have eggs. And yeah, this bull snake got in. They just didn't wildlife proof their chicken coop when they were building it. So it got in, swallowed these golf balls, wasn't able to get out, got stuck in the fence. And it worked out because if it further digested them, it would have been much worse. And so my two amazing wildlife rehabilitators that we have were able to take that snake in and then just slowly massage those golf balls up essentially until it was able to regurgitate it. There's a little bit more in there, of course. They had to make sure the golf balls weren't bound to the intestinal lining, and they had to move at a very specific speed to not do internal damage to the snake, but also, prevent those golf balls from going further into the system. And then, it was able just to regurgitate both of those golf balls up. And besides some mild soreness and some scale damage from getting stuck in that chicken coop fence, it's fine. It's still in our care. It has already eaten one little meal from us, which is great. And we're just waiting until it defecates to prove to us that its GI system is working normally. And then it'll be released back in West Loveland, near where it came from. We won't release it right there on the property, likely because that property is proven to be not a great, safe wildlife habitat, but we'll make sure he gets set up for success and somewhere where there's actual eggs for him to feast on.
Yeah, they did too good of a job of making the golf balls look like eggs.
Yeah, exactly.
I know one thing about your center that's really unique is that you have this wildlife rescue vehicle. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so essentially we have outfitted it to be specifically for wildlife rescue. And that's the only vehicle in the state of Colorado that exists purely for rescue of all different wildlife. And it's just loaded with all kinds of cool equipment. We just took it to our first public event where we were able to do tours of the vehicle with the public and show off the net gun in there. We have a collapsible ladder that we can use to get on rooftops and in chimneys and stuff, or get animals out of canals or whatever we need that for, even putting baby birds back in nests. We have a lot of habitat improvement stuff in there. All of our medical kits, our stop the bleed kits, and our splinting and everything there. Of course, wound cleaning and flushing equipment as well. We have binoculars and spotting scopes so that we can do hands-free examinations where we can just look at an animal. We don't have to stress it out by grabbing it, and we can kind of assess and see what's going on when we get there. Before we had it, we had to use our personal vehicles. But this one, we're able to outfit it with emergency lights and reflective graphics and stuff that keeps us safe when we're working on hit-by-car animals and things on the side of the road. And then also bringing legitimacy. When it comes into a gated community or something, we typically hear a lot less hassle than if I was just driving my old pavement princess of an old car up to someone's house. But it's great. It's come in handy. It's saved thousands of animals so far this year, and helped us save thousands of animals, I should say. And it's accessible to our team. So not only do we have our 3 staff members, but we have about 100 volunteers on our team. That way, if they need to do something, we can just give them the keys and they're good to go. They can roll out on their own. And I know that they're going to be safe and have all the supplies they need.
Yeah, it's great to have something like that that's so versatile that you can just dedicate it towards doing whatever it needs to do and not having to take your personal vehicle and put a raccoon in the back of it or anything like that.
Absolutely. The gas prices this year definitely threw a curveball at us as far as that budget line item goes. But, we have very generous supporters that help make our life-saving work possible. And hopefully the vehicle acts as an inspiration to some of these different communities or states getting constant wildlife calls, and to show them, it's probably less expensive to build this type of vehicle than it is to build a fire truck or police vehicle or something like that. And it helps a lot of people too. It's a very good asset to our team.
Awesome. So if people see animals or wildlife that they think might need help, what's kind of the process for what you'd recommend? The answer is probably not like, go check on that animal yourself. So can you tell us a little bit about what the ideal situation might look like or what you hope to happen?
Yeah, so I always tell folks if they find an animal in distress, the first thing to do is, of course, appease their safety. If it's a hit-by-car animal, maybe don't stand in the middle of the road and call me. Get to somewhere safe and call us. But if someone finds an animal in need, contact their local licensed wildlife rehabilitator and just follow their instructions. We always advise folks don't provide any medical care or food or water to any of the animals they find, just because a lot of times we see the most compassionate people do the most harm to these animals, whether they're aspirating them or giving them the wrong food and messing up their stomachs, or keeping them in an enclosure that's not safe, or not keeping their stress level down. So really, it's best just to call a wildlife rehabilitator. If it's something where it's a life-threatening emergency to that animal, Let's say you were driving down the road and you just saw the car in front of you hit a turtle and there's nobody else on the road. Yeah, maybe stop, get that animal into some kind of secure, breathable container, keep it at room temperature, and then give us a call and we can walk them through the next steps, or we can refer them to a facility that might even be closer. While we serve Northern Colorado, we get calls from out of state. We've had calls from Wyoming, Tennessee, Ohio, Michigan. And so we have resources where we can look up the closest rehab facility to them and then refer them. And so that's kind of how we play our role in helping that animal in those situations. But yeah, it's all just about getting in contact with a wildlife rehabilitator.
Yeah, I think it's really important, and something that we try to do in every episode of this podcast is to try to give people something that they can do in their everyday lives to either appreciate or understand and respect animals, knowing what to do if you see an animal in distress. Something that I think Northern Colorado Wildlife Center does really well is you put on a lot of events too. So I know that you put on Wildfest in Fort Collins, and that was a day where there was lots of different organizations who all work with animal education to get to come together. What other kind of events or education do you do?
We do a lot of school events in the school season where we have some educational animals we can actually bring and let the kids hang out with and interact with. That's always fun, especially the kids that are like afraid of snakes. And we'll bring these really cool snakes and they'll touch it for the first time. And they're like, oh, that's not that bad. And I just love seeing them get over those kind of fears and just inspiring. We'll visit churches, community festivals, and things like that. We'll set up a booth that people can come and look at our educational displays. And then our fundraiser, like we have our annual fundraisers Top Dog at the end of September at Odell Brewing. And it's just a really lighthearted dog competition event. And it's not like agility tests or anything like that. It's like dress your dog up in a costume and then the audience gets to vote on who has the cutest costume and games like that. So we're doing that, but we just try to get out there wherever we can. Yeah, Wildfest was fun. Wildfest was the largest event that our nonprofits ever put on or hosted, and certainly the largest event I've ever tried to coordinate. And it went really well. Yeah, like 21 different organizations and I think 36 different educational ambassador animals that visited there. So it was the largest conglomeration of ambassador animals ever at an event in Larimer County. The heat threw us for a loop. It was like 100 degrees that day, if not more. So we had some folks outside that were kind of sweating bullets, but they toughed it out. We had cold drinks and good lunch for everyone, face painting. And so if we can bring the community together in the spirit of education and especially in the spirit of environmental education, that's all I can hope for. However we can get from point A to point B on that front is pretty much up to my team and up to my environmental educator and whoever else wants to kind of put something on.
It seems like people who work with wildlife always have the ability to tell lots of stories like this, but I'm curious if there's any misconceptions with wildlife that you want to break down.
We could do a whole episode just on this. I think the biggest misconception that we get, one of the oldest misconceptions, is the fact that if you touch a baby animal, the parents are going to abandon it. And we get that all the time, especially with birds, for some reason. Birds, especially songbirds, have a really poor sense of smell, a really bad olfactory system. And so they don't abandon it. The maternal instincts and paternal instincts are so much stronger than maybe the slightest smell of human on a baby animal. And like I said, a lot of them can't even smell you. And so that's why we're always telling folks if a baby bird like falls out of a nest, we're like, oh, is it injured? We'll have them send us pictures and kind of work with them. And if we can deem it healthy and fine, then we'll have them put it back in the nest and mom will resume taking care of it. Same thing with raccoons and squirrels and stuff like that. With the rabies vector species, we have to be a little bit more careful, of course, from a public safety side of things. We can talk people through the right kind of gloves they need to wear and how to avoid contact and stuff like that and how to safely do it. And they can be everyday wildlife heroes out there. But while it's important to not harass wildlife or messing with them if they don't need help yet, if you have to just touch a baby animal to get it back into a nest or put it into a safe container until I can get out there to one of my team members, that's fine. It's not going to injure anything. I think the other misconception, which is weird, is that people think every animal eats bread. I don't know why, because they see people feeding bread to the ducks at the parks, if that's why, but bread is really, really bad for wild animals. And so we recommend no one feeds it to anything, especially ducks in waterfowl, they can develop a condition called angel wing that prevents them from ever being able to fly again. But we've had people put in pieces of bread with like sparrows or snakes and things like that. And yeah, I don't know what Google page they're looking at, but it's very wrong. They're usually too scared. That's the other thing people don't understand is if an animal needs help and I'm having you put in a box or something like that, it's like getting abducted by aliens for them, right? They don't know what's going on. They're confused, but they only see us as predators. So they don't know we're helping. And so the last thing on their mind is wanting to eat or drink anything usually. So that's why we tell people just don't even worry about food and water. They'll be fine. Even if it's overnight, they're not going to starve overnight or get dehydrated. So
bread with ducks, I don't know how that became a thing or how it's been so solidified, but yeah, the ducks don't need breads. There's lots of alternatives that you can use. Like I know people use peas, things like that, but yeah, just keep the bread for yourself. It's not something that the animals are going to come in contact with out in nature. So the last thing I wanted to ask you is how best can people support Northern Colorado Wildlife Center?
of course, donations are always a really great form of support. They make our life-saving work possible between paying for surgery, medication costs, just keeping the lights and water on in our facility. But also, not everyone is able to donate financially. And so if someone wants to volunteer, that's always great. Donating your time, that's the most valuable resource we all have. And so I always appreciate that. If there's supplies that you think we may be able to use, reach out and see if we can donate that. Once we get our facility expansion, we can find a property to work on. We'll need all kinds of in-kind donations, whether it's food or cleaning supplies, medical equipment, or just get out and go clean up your local natural area, clean up some litter, even if it's not yours. And maybe if you see some people feeding ducks bread, maybe stop them. Doing things that prevent an animal from being injured also really helps us out, because I would love to get run out of a job. If no animals need my help, that's a dream world circumstance for me. But yeah, so even if folks just want to get out there and do something that helps prevent an animal from being injured, I'll take that form of support any day.
Best case scenario, we put you out of a job. So no animals need care anymore. You'll have to find something else to do.
I'll go finally be an astronaut or whatever else my 5-year-old son wanted to do.
Exactly. Work your way down the dream bucket list there. Well, excellent. Thanks so much for talking today and helping to share the work that Northern Colorado Wildlife Center does. It was great to have you on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Matthew. Happy to come back anytime.
So much good work is done by the Northern Colorado Wildlife Center, and they're an incredible resource for any services or information you need about injured wildlife. I don't remember specifically, but they may have even been the organization that I called to help me with my bat. Also, if you recall our bonus episode about the Fort Collins Top Dog competition, that event was helping to raise money to support the Northern Colorado Wildlife Center. So you gotta love the sense of community and collaboration among animal lovers. If trying to figure out the mystery animal sound was just eating away at you, you're in luck. Once again, here's the sound. This sound is of a red-footed tortoise, which if you knew the exact species just by the sound, you are a true animal detective. You also get a bonus point if you figured out that it was munching on some lettuce. Tortoises eat mostly plants, like leaves, grasses, flowers, and fruits. However, they'll occasionally munch on other things like mushrooms, small invertebrates, dead animals or carrion, and even soil. I'm always amazed by the incredible sounds that animals can make. Tune in to the next episode for another chance to play What's That Animal? If you enjoyed this conversation, subscribe and consider supporting us directly at patreon.com/onewildpodcast. Here, you'll find exclusive content, like the full video versions of our conversations. To find out more about the other work we do, visit our website at onewildpodcast.com. Follow us on Instagram at @theechoanimals and follow our TikTok at creature.feature. On behalf of all animals, thank you for listening.